everyone. Thanks for joining us. Wallace Stevens was born in Reading, Pennsylvania in 1879 and died in Hartford, Connecticut in 1955. He was a lawyer who worked for the Hartford Accident and Indemnity Company, where he became the vice president. His first book of poetry was published when he was 44. Notes Toward a Supreme Fiction was published in 1942. Wallace Stevens, in a letter to Henry Church dated December 8, 1942, wrote, "I have no idea of the form that a supreme fiction would take. The notes start out with the idea that it would not take any form, that it would be abstract. Of course, in the long run, poetry would be the supreme fiction. The essence of poetry is change, and the essence of change is that it gives pleasure," end of quote. Poet Holly Prado noted that there is, quote, "the difficulty of expressing the truly abstract," and that Stevens turns to the specificity of weather with which to link the abstract, quote, "brushed up by brushy winds and brushy clouds, wetted by blue, colder for white," end of quote. It must be abstract, and it must be change, and it must change are section titles. In It Must Change, he writes, "Violets, doves, girls, bees, and hyacinths are inconstant objects of inconstant cause in a universe of inconstancy. This means night blue is an inconstant thing." Stevens wrote, "The west wind was the music, the motion, the force, to which the swans curveted a will to change. There was a will to change, a necessitous and present way, a presentation, a kind of volatile world, too constant to be denied." End of quote. New quote, "The freshness of transformation is the freshness of a world. It is our own. It is ourselves." End of quote, precedes the section title, "It Must Give Pleasure." Abstraction, change, pleasure are Stevens' way, told with an exceptional use of language and vision, a joyous and sensuous journey. It's an honor and a pleasure to have each one of these people return to the show. The magnificent readers are, in order of appearance, James Cushing, Corinne Conley, Bob Beitcher, Phoebe MacAdams, and Gail Wronsky. Here's James Cushing.
I'd like to begin by thanking Harry for asking me to participate in this. I'm going to be reading the first few sections from It Must Be Abstract. I'll begin with the superscription, the poem Notes Toward a Supreme Fiction, dedicated to Henry Church. "And for what, except for you, do I feel love? Do I press the extremest book of the wisest man close to me, hidden in me day and night? In the uncertain light of single certain truth, equal in living changingness to the light in which I meet you, in which we sit at rest, for a moment in the central of our being, the vivid transparence that you bring is peace. It must be abstract. 1. Begin, Phoebe, by perceiving the idea of this invention, this invented world, the inconceivable idea of the sun. You must become an ignorant man again and see the sun again with an ignorant eye, and see it clearly in the idea of it. Never suppose an inventing mind as source of this idea, nor for that mind compose of a luminous master folded in his fire. How clean the sun when seen in its idea, washed in the remotest cleanliness of a heaven that has expelled us and our images. The death of one God, is the death of all. Let purple Phoebus lie in umber harvest. Let Phoebus slumber and die in autumn umber. Phoebus is dead, Ephibe. But Phoebus was a name for something that never could be named. There was a project for the sun, and is. There is a project for the sun. The sun must bear no name, gold flourisher, but be in the difficulty of what it is to be. 2. It is the celestial ennui of apartments that sends us back to the first idea, the quick of this invention. And yet, so poisonous are the ravishments of truth, so fatal to the truth itself. The first idea becomes the hermit in the poet's metaphors, who comes and goes and comes and goes all day. May there be an ennui of the first idea. What else, prodigious scholar, should there be? The monastic man is an artist. The philosopher appoints man's place in music, say, today, but the priest desires. The philosopher desires. And not to have is the beginning of desire. To have what is not is its ancient cycle. It is desire at the end of winter, when it observes the effortless weather turning blue and sees the myosotis on its bush. Being virile, it hears the calendar hymn. It knows that what it has is what is not, and throws it away like a thing of another time, as morning throws off stale moonlight and shabby sleep. 3. The poem refreshes life so that we share for a moment the first idea. It satisfies belief in an immaculate beginning and sends us, winged by an unconscious will, to an immaculate end. We move between these points, from that ever early candor to its late plural, and the candor of them is the strong exhilaration of what we feel from what we think, of thought beating in the heart, as if blood newly came, an elixir, an excitation, a pure power. The poem, through candor, brings back a power again that gives a candid kind to everything. We say, at night an Arabian in my room, with his damned hoobla, hoobla, hoobla how, inscribes a primitive astronomy across the unscrawled fours the future casts, and throws his stars around the floor. By day, the wood dove used to chant his hoobla hoo, and still the grossest iridescence of ocean howls hoo and rises and howls hoo and falls. Life's nonsense pierces us with strange relation. 4. The first idea was not our own. Adam in Eden was the father of Descartes, and Eve made air the mirror of herself, of her sons, and of her daughters. They found themselves in heaven as in a glass, a second earth, and in the earth itself they found a green, the inhabitants of a very varnished green. But the first idea was not to shape the clouds in imitation. The clouds preceded us. There was a muddy center before we breathed. There was a myth before the myth began, vulnerable and articulate and complete. From this, the poem springs, that we live in a place that is not our own, and much more, not ourselves. And hard it is in spite of blazoned days. We are the mimics. Clouds are pedagogues. The air is not a mirror, but bare board, coulisse bright dark, tragic chiaroscuro and comic color of the rose, in which abysmal instruments make sounds like pips of the sweeping meanings that we add to them. 5. The lion roars in the enraging desert, reddens the sand with his red-colored noise, defies red emptiness to evolve his match, master by foot and jaws and by the mane, most supple challenger. The elephant breaches the darkness of Ceylon with blares. The glitter goes on surfaces of tanks, shattering velvetist far away. The bear, the ponderous cinnamon, snarls in his mountains as summer thunder as sleeps through winter snow. But you, Ephebe, look from your attic window, your mansard with a rented piano. You lie in silence upon your bed. You clutch the corner of the pillow in your hand. You writhe and press a bitter utterance from your writhing, dumb, yet voluble of dumb utterance. You look across the roofs as sigil and as ward, and in your center mark them and are cowed. These are the heroic children whom time breeds against the first idea. To lash the lion, carapace elephants, teach bears to juggle. 6. Not to be realized because not to be seen, not to be loved nor hated because not to be realized. Weather by Franz Hals, brushed up by brushy winds in brushy clouds, wetted by blue, colder for white. Not to be spoken to without a roof, without first fruits, without the virginal of birds, the dark blown ceinture loosened, not relinquished. Gay is, gay was, the gay forsythia and yellow, yellow thins the northern blue. Without a name and nothing to be desired, if only imagined, but imagined well. My house has changed a little in the sun. The fragrance of the magnolias comes close, false flick, false form, but falseness in. It must be visible or invisible or visible or both, a seeing and unseeing in the eye. The weather and the giant of the weather say the weather, the mere air, an abstraction blooded as a man by thought.
7. It feels good as it is without the giant, a thinker of the first idea. Perhaps the truth depends on a walk around a lake, a composing as the body tires, a stop to see hepatica, a stop to watch a definition growing certain, and a wait within that certainty. A rest in the swags of pine trees bordering the lake. Perhaps there are times of inherent excellence. And when the cock crows on the left and all is well, in incalculable balances at which a kind of Swiss perfection comes, and the familiar music of the machine sets up its schwammerei, not balances that we achieve, but balances that happen as a man and woman meet and love forthwith. Perhaps there are moments of awakening, extreme, fortuitous, personal, in which we more than awaken, sit on the edge of sleep as on an elevation, and behold the academies like structures in a mist. 8. Can we compose a castle fortress home, even with the help of Viollet-le-Duc, and set the McCullough there as the major man? The first idea is an imagined thing. The pensive giant prone in violet space may be the McCullough, an expedient, logos and logic, crystal hypothesis, insipid and a form to speak the word and every latent double in the word. Bow-linguist. But the McCullough is McCullough. It does not follow that major man is man. If McCullough himself lay lounging by the sea, drowned in its washes, reading in the sound about the thinker of the first idea, we might take habit, whether from wave or phrase, or power of the wave, or deepened speech, or a leaner being moving in on him, or greater aptitude and apprehension, as if the waves at last were never broken, as if the language suddenly with ease said things it had laboriously spoken. 9. The romantic intoning, the declaimed clairvoyance are parts of apotheosis, appropriate and of its nature, the idiom thereof. They differ from reason's click-clack, its applied end flashings. But apotheosis is not the origin of the major man. He comes compact in invisible foils from reason, lighted at midnight by the studious eye, swaddled in reverie, the object of the hum of thoughts evaded in the mind, hidden from other thoughts, he that reposes on a breast forever precious for that touch, for whom the good of April falls tenderly, falls down the cockbirds calling at the time. My dame, sing for this person accurate songs. He is and may be, but oh, he is this foundling of the infected past, so bright, so moving in the manner of his hand. Yet look not at his colored eyes, give him no names, dismiss him from your images. The heart of him is purest in the heart. 10. The major abstraction is the idea of man, and major man is its exponent, abler in the abstract than in his singular, more fecund as principle than particle, happy fecundity, florabundant force, in being more than an exception, part, though an heroic part, of the commonale. The major abstraction is the commonale, the inanimate, difficult visage. Who is it? What rabbi grown furious with human wish? What chieftain walking by himself, crying, most miserable, most victorious, does not see these separate figures one by one, and yet see only one in his old coat, his slouching pantaloons beyond the town, looking for what was where it used to be. Cloudless the morning. It is he, the man in that old coat, those sagging pantaloons. It is of him, of Phoebe, to make, to confect the final elegance, not to console nor sanctify, but plainly to propound. It must change. 1. The old seraph, parcel gilded among violets, inhaled the appointed odor, while the doves rose up like phantoms from chronologies. The Italian girls wore jonquils in their hair, and these the seraph saw, had seen long since, in the bedeau of the mothers, would see again. The bees came booming as if they had never gone, as if hyacinths had never gone. We say this changes and that changes. Thus the constant violets, doves, girls, bees, and hyacinths are inconstant objects of inconstant cause in a universe of inconstancy. This means night blue is an inconstant thing. The seraph is satyr in Saturn, according to his thoughts. It means the distaste we feel for this withered scene is that it has not changed enough. It remains, it is a repetition. The bees come booming as if. The pigeons clatter in the air. An erotic perfume, half of the body, half of an obvious acid is sure what it intends. And the booming is blunt, not broken in subtleties. 2. The president ordains the bee to be immortal. The president ordains. But does the body lift its heavy wing, take up, again an inexhaustible being, rise over the loftiest antagonist to drone the green phrases of its juvenile? Why should the bee recapture a lost bleg, find a deep echo in a horn, and buzz the bottomless trophy, new hornsman after old? The president has apples on the table and barefoot servants round him who adjust the curtains to a metaphysical tea, and the banners of the nation flutter, burst on the flagpoles in a red-blue dazzle, whack at the halyards. Why then, when in golden fury, spring vanishes the scraps of winter? Why should there be a question of returning or of death in memory's dream? Is spring asleep? This warmth is for lovers at last, accomplishing their love, this beginning, not resuming, this booming and booming of the new-come bee.
3. The great statue of the General Dupuy rested immobile, though neighboring catafalques bore off the residents of its noble place. The right uplifted foreleg of the horse suggested that, at the final funeral, the music halted and the horse stood still. On Sundays, lawyers in their promenades approached this strongly heightened effigy to study the past, and doctors, having bathed themselves with care, sought out the nerveless frame of a suspension, a permanence so rigid that it made the general a bit absurd, changed his true flesh to an inhuman bronze. There never had been, never could be, such a man. The lawyers disbelieved. The doctors said that as keen a lustrous ornament as a setting for geraniums, the general, the very Place Dupuy, in fact, belonged among our more vestigial states of mind. Nothing had happened because nothing had changed. Yet the general was rubbish in the end. Two things of opposite natures seem to depend on one another, as a man depends on a woman, day on night, the imagined on the real. This is the origin of change. Winter and spring, cold copulars embrace and forth the particulars of rapture come. Music falls on the silence like a sense, a passion that we feel, not understand. Morning and afternoon are clasped together, and north and south are an intrinsic couple, and sun and rain a plural, like two lovers that walk away as one in the greenest body. In solitude, the trumpets of solitude are not of another solitude resounding. A little string speaks for a crowd of voices. The partaker partakes of that which changes him. The child that touches takes character from the thing, the body it touches. The captain and his men are one, and the sailor and the sea are one. Follow after, O my companion, my fellow, myself, sister and solace, brother and delight. 5. On a blue island in a sky-wide water, the wild orange trees continued to bloom and to bear, long after the planter's death. A few limes remained where his house had fallen. 3 scaggy trees weighted with garbled green. These were the planter's turquoise and his orange blotches. These were his 0 green, a green baked greener in the greenest sun. These were his beaches, his sea myrtles in white sand, his patter of the long sea slushes. There was an island beyond him on which rested an island to the south, on which rested like a mountain, a pineapple pungent as Cuban summer. And là-bas, the cool bananas grew, hung heavily on the great banana tree, which pierces clouds and bends on half the world. He thought often of the land from which he came, how that whole country was a melon, pink if seen rightly, and yet a possible red. An unaffected man in a negative light could not have borne his labor, nor have died sighing that he should leave the banjo's twang. Be thou me, said Sparrow. 6. Be thou me, said Sparrow to the crackled blade, and you, be thou me as you blow, when in my coppice you behold me be. Ah, Kay, the bloody wren, the felon jay, Kay, the jug-throat robin pouring out, be thou me in my glade. There was such idiot minstrelry in rain, so many clappers going without bells, that these bethals compose a heavenly gong. One voice repeating, one tireless chorister, the phrases of a single phrase, K, a single text, granite monotony. One sole face, like a photograph of fate, glass blower's destiny, bloodless episcopus, eye without lid, mind without any dream. These are of minstrels lacking minstrelsy, of an earth in which the first leaf is the tail, of leaves in which the sparrow is a bird of stone that never changes. Be thou him, you and you, be thou him and be thou. It is a sound like any other. It will end. 7. After a luster of the moon, we say we have not the need of any paradise. We have not the need of any seducing hymn. It is true. Tonight, the lilacs magnify the easy passion, the ever-ready love of the lover that lies within us, and we breathe an odor evoking nothing, absolute. We encounter in the dead middle of the night the purple odor, the abundant bloom. The lover sighs as for accessible bliss, which he can take within him on his breath, possess in his heart, conceal, and nothing known. For easy passion and ever-ready love are of our earthy birth, and here and now, and where we live, and everywhere we live. as in the top cloud of a May night evening, as in the courage of the ignorant man who chants by book, in the heat of the scholar who writes the book, hot for another accessible bliss. The fluctuations of certainty, the change of degrees of perception in the scholar's dark. 8. On her trip around the world, Nunzia Nunzio confronted Ozymandias. She went alone and like a vestal long prepared. I am the spouse. She took her necklace off and laid it in the sand. As I am the spouse. She opened her stone-studded belt. I am the spouse, divested of bright gold, the spouse beyond the emerald or amethyst, beyond the burning body that I bear. I am the woman stripped more nakedly than nakedness, standing before an inflexible order, saying, I am the contemplated spouse. Speak to me that which spoken will array me in its own only precious ornament. Set on me the spirit's diamond coronal. Clothe me entire in the final filament, so that I tremble with such love so known, and myself am precious for your perfecting. Then Ozymandias said to spouse, the bride is never naked. A fictive covering weaves always glistening from the heart and mind.
9. The poem goes from the poet's gibberish to the gibberish of the Vulgate and back again. Does it move to and fro, or is it of both at once? Is it a luminous flittering or the constant? Is the poem both peculiar and general? There's a meditation there in which there seems to be an evasion, a thing not apprehended or not apprehended well. Does the poet evade us as in a senseless element? Evade this hot, dependent orator, the spokesman at our bluntest barriers, exponent by a form of speech, the speaker of a speech, only a little of the tongue? Is it the gibberish of the Vulgate that he seeks? He tries by a peculiar speech to speak the peculiar potency of the general, to compound the imagination's Latin with the lingua franca et jocundissima. 10. A bench was his catalepsy, theater of trope. He sat in the park. The water of the lake was full of artificial things, like a page of music, like an upper air, like a momentary color, in which swans were seraphs, were saints, were changing essences. The west wing was the music, the motion, the force to which the swans curveted, a will to change, a will to make iris frettings on the blank. There was a will to change, a necessitous and present way, a presentation, a kind of volatile world, too constant to be denied. The eye of a vagabond in metaphor that catches our own. The casual is not enough. The freshness of transformation is the freshness of a world. It is our own. It is ourselves, the freshness of ourselves. And that necessity and that presentation are rubbings of a glass in which we peer. Of these beginnings, gay and green, propose the suitable amours. Time will write them down. It must give pleasure. 1. To sing jubillas at exact accustomed times, to be crested and wear the mane of a multitude, and so as part to exult with its great throat, to speak of joy and to sing of it. Born on the shoulders of joyous men, to feel the heart that is the common, the bravest fundament. This is a facile exercise. Jerome begat the tubas and the fire wind strings, the golden fingers picking blue, dark blue air. For companies of voices moving there, to find the sound, the bleakest ancestor, to find a light in music, issuing whereon it falls in more than sensual mode. But the difficultest rigor is forthwith on the image of what we see, to catch from that irrational moment its unreasoning, as when the sun comes rising, when the sea clears deeply, when the moon hangs on the wall of heaven haven. These are not things transformed, yet we are shaken by them as if they were. We reason about them with a later reason. 2. The blue woman, linked and lacquered at her window, did not desire that feathery Argentines should be cold silver, neither that frothy clouds should foam, be foaming waves, should move like them, nor that the sexual blossoms should repose without their fierce addictions, nor that the heat of summer, growing fragrant in the night, should strengthen her abortive dreams and take in sleep its natural form. It was enough for her that she remembered. The Argentines of spring come to their place in the grape leaves to cool their ruddy pulses. Harmonious heat of August pines enters the room. It drowses and is night. It was enough for her that she remembered. The blue woman looked from her window, named the corals of the dogwood, cold and clear, cold, coldly delineating, being real, clear, and except for the eye, without intrusion. 3. A lasting visage in a lasting bush, a face of stone in an unending red, red emerald, red slitted blue, a face of slate, an ancient forehead hung with heavy hair. The channel slots of rain, the red rose red and weathered, the ruby watered, worn, the vines around the throat, the shapeless lips, the frown like serpents basking on the brow, the spent feeling leaving nothing of itself, red in red repetitions, never going away, a little rusty, a little rouged, a little roughened and ruder, a crown the eye could not escape, a red renown blowing itself upon the tedious ear, an effulgence faded, dull cornelian, too venerably used. That might have been, it might and might have been, but as it was, a dead shepherd brought tremendous cords from hell and bade the sheep carouse, or so they said. Children in love with them brought earthy early flowers and scattered them about, no two alike. 4. We reason of these things with later reason, and we make of what we see clearly and have seen, a place dependent on ourselves. There was a mystic marriage in Catawba. At noon, it was on the midday of the year, between a great captain and the maiden Bauda. It was their ceremonial hymn. Anon, we loved but would no marriage make. Anon, the one refused the other one to take. Forswore the sipping of the marriage wine. Each must the other take not for his high, his puissant front, nor for her subtle sound, the shoo, shoo, shoo of secret cymbals round. Each must the other take as sign, short sign, to stop the whirlwind, balk the elements. The great captain loved the ever hill Catawba, and therefore married Bada, whom he found there. And Bada loved the captain as she loved the sun. They married well because the marriage place was what they loved. It was neither heaven nor hell. They were love's characters come face to face. 5. We drank Mercer, ate lobster Bombay with mango chutney. Then the canon aspirin declaimed of his sister in what a sensible ecstasy she lived in her house. She had 2 daughters, one of 4 and one of 7, whom she dressed the way a painter of powdered color paints. But still, she painted them, appropriate to their poverty, a gray, blue, yellowed out with ribbon, a rigid statement of them, white, with Sunday pearls, her widow's gaiety. She hid them under simple names. She held them closelier to her by rejecting dreams. The words they spoke were voices that she heard. She looked at them and saw them as they were, and what she felt fought off the barest phrase. The canon aspirin, having said these things, reflected, humming an outline of a fugue of praise, a conjugation done by choirs. Yet when her children slept, his sister herself demanded of sleep, in the excitements of silence, only the unmuddled self of sleep for them.
6. When at long midnight the canon came to sleep and normal things had yawned themselves away, the nothingness was a nakedness, a point beyond which fact could not progress as fact. Thereon the learning of the man conceived once more night's pale illuminations, gold beneath, far underneath the surface of his eye, and audible in the mountain of his ear, the very material of his mind. So that he was the ascending wings he saw, and moved on them in orbit's outer stars, descending to the children's bed on which they lay. For then with huge pathetic force, straight to the utmost crown of night he flew. The nothingness was a nakedness, a point beyond which thought could not progress as thought. He had to choose, but it was not a choice between excluding things. It was not a choice between, but of. He chose to include the things that in each other are included, the whole, the complicated, the amassing harmony. 7. He imposes orders as he thinks of them, as the fox and snake do. It is a brave affair. Next, he builds capitals, and in their corridors, whiter than wax, sonorous, fame as it is, he establishes statues of reasonable men who surpassed the most literate owl, the most erudite of elephants. But to impose is not to discover. To discover an order as of a season, to discover summer and know it, to discover winter and know it well, to find, not to impose, not to have reasoned at all out of nothing to have come upon major weather. It is possible, possible, possible. It must be possible. It must be that in time the real will from its crude compoundings come, seeming at first a beast disgorged, unliked, warmed by a desperate milk, to find the real, to be stripped of every fiction except one, the fiction of the absolute. Angel, be silent in your luminous cloud and hear the luminous melody of proper sound. 8. What am I to believe? If the angel in his cloud, serenely gazing at the violent abyss, plucks on his strings to pluck abysmal glory, leaps downward through evening's revelations, and on his spreading wings needs nothing but deep space, forgets the gold center, the golden destiny, grows warm in the motionless motion of his flight. Am I that imagine this angel less satisfied? Are the wings his, the lapis haunted air? Is it he or is it I that experience this? Is it I then that keeps saying there is an hour filled with expressible bliss in which I have no need, am happy, forget need's golden hand, am satisfied without solacing majesty? And if there is an hour, there is a day, there is a month, a year, there is a time in which majesty is a mirror of the self. I have not, but I am, and as I am, I am. These external regions, what do we fill them with except reflections, the escapades of death, Cinderella fulfilling herself beneath the roof? 9. Whistle aloud, too weedy wren. I can do all that angels can. I enjoy like them, like men besides, like men in light secluded, enjoying angels. Whistle, forced bugler that bugles for the mate. Nearby the nest, cock bugler, whistle and bugle and stop just short. Red robin, stop in your preludes, practicing mere repetitions. These things at least comprise an occupation, an exercise, a work, a thing final in itself and therefore good. One of the vast repetitions final in themselves and therefore good, the going round and round and round, the merely going round until merely going round is a final good, the way wine comes at a table in a wood. And we enjoy like men the way a leaf above the table spins its constant spin so that we look at it with pleasure, look at it spinning its eccentric measure. Perhaps the man hero is not the exceptional monster, but he that of repetition is most master. 10. Fat girl, terrestrial, my summer, my night. How is it I find you indifference, see you there in a moving contour, a change not quite completed? You are familiar, yet an aberration. Civil, madam, I am, but underneath a tree, this unprovoked sensation requires that I should name you flatly. Waste no words, check your evasions, hold you to yourself. Even so, when I think of you as strong or tired, bent over work, anxious, content, alone, you remain the more than natural figure. You become the soft-footed phantom, the irrational distortion, however fragrant, however dear. That's it, the more than rational distortion, the fiction that results from feeling. Yes, that. They will get it straight one day at the Sorbonne. We shall return at twilight from the lecture, pleased that the irrational is rational, until flicked by feeling in a gildered street, I call you by name, my green, my fluent mundo. You will have stopped revolving except in crystal. Soldier, there is a war between the mind and sky, between thought and day and night. It is for that the poet is always in the sun, patches the moon together in his room to his Virgilian cadences, up, down, up, down. It is a war that never ends, yet it depends on yours. The two are one. They are a plural, a right and left, a pair, two parallels that meet if only in the meeting of their shadows, or that meet in a book, in a barrack, a letter from Malay. But your war ends, and after it you return with 6 meats and 12 wines, or else without, to walk another room. Monsieur and comrade, the soldier is poor without the poet's lines. His petty syllabi, the sounds that stick, inevitably modulating in the blood, and war for war, each has its gallant kind. how simply the fictive hero becomes the real, how gladly with proper words the soldier dies if he must, or lives on in the bread of faithful speech.
Thank you all for your marvelous, nourishing reading. We have about 4 minutes left. So I see Jennifer, you've been listening to this. Why don't you start and then everybody take about 45 seconds to say what they want to. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I know that it is just because this just happened, but Gail, the music that you gave to Wallace Stevens's words, just off the charts. Stop the world. I want to get off and just enjoy this moment. Thank you. That was
Thank you so much.
Since you brought up Gail, why don't we start with Gail and go backwards with the lineup? And as I said, we have about 4 to 5 minutes left. So everybody take about a minute. Gail?
Oh, okay. Just to say anything?
Anything you like. About
okay. Well, I have a little story, a little short story. I had a really good friend in Charlottesville, Virginia, who owned a used bookstore and had a copy of the chapbook that this poem was originally published as.
Wow.
And it's worth, like, I looked it up on Abe and found out it's worth like 10 grand or something at this point. There aren't that many of them around. So what a wonderful thing to have.
Phoebe?
I have a story about this book. I got this book at a place called Bart's Books in Ojai. And when I opened it up, there was the signature of my oldest friend in the world, Jody Oberlander. So and then when I told her about it, she said, "Oh my God." And so I have Judy's notes in this, which were a pleasure to look at. And I loved hearing this. I've been studying this poem for the past week and reading about it because it's not an easy poem. And it was such a pleasure to hear this with all of the different voices and the musicality, Gail. It was really a delight. So Harry, thank you for doing this.
Mr. Bob Beitcher?
Yeah, so I have my copy of Wallace Stevens' collected poems bought at Kepler's Books in Menlo Park. And I clearly, sometime in my life, way before this in graduate school, read this poem. I have my notes in it. And because this poem is so complicated and ever moving, I have no idea what my notes mean. I have no idea what poem I was reading and making notes on at the time because they don't make any sense to me now. It's become something completely different. So maybe, Phoebe, I have your copy and you have Judith's copy.
Corinne?
Well, I love hearing the poets talk about a poet. It's so much better an idea of what's going on here. I must say that in reading and doing my research on Wallace Stevens, I was shocked to learn that he was a successful insurance man, insurance executive, and so his life must have been filled with data and statistics, and that he would write poetry walking, where he lived in Hartford, Connecticut, of course. He would walk to work and he would write poems in his head on the way, and then call his secretary when he got there in the morning and repeat them to her, and she would write them down. And then I guess they'd get into data and statistics, but I found that just mind-blowing, really.
Maybe the explanation, the complexity of his poetry is that she was writing it down wrong.
James Cushing?
In the edition that I have, there's a section of his prose writings, and there's a piece called Adagia, from which I'd like to give you a couple of lines. The mind is the most powerful thing in the world. There is nothing in life except what one thinks of it. There is nothing beautiful in life except life. There is no wing like meaning. Poetry is a means of redemption.
Very good, Jim. And may I just say one last thing before I turn it back to Jennifer? He also said, after a luster of the moon, we need not ... So he was also tuned into the elemental things too. So thank you all for a marvelous reading. And here's Jennifer Clymer.
Thank you, Harry, as always.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Harry and Jennifer.